what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
For organizations looking to enhance their customer relationships, this is Stepping Up Service. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stepping Up Service here on themesh.tv. This is our audio discussion show where we talk about the world of customer service. We talk about customer service providing to customers, to clients, to coworkers, all the different populations we come into contact with during an organization's day. My name is Alan Jackson with the Jackson Group. We conduct employee and customer satisfaction surveys for a variety of organizations and industries. And with me, my co-host, Ed Gagnon with Customer Service Solutions. Ed, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Alan. How are you doing today?
Doing just fine. Doing great. Looking forward to a good weekend. We got some good weather, and it looks to be nice and warm outside, so should be a fun weekend there to go into.
Yeah, definitely excited about it. We've had some heat issues, AC issues in our house, and they're fixed. No. So, we're going to be good whether we're inside or out. They got fixed today, so I'm thrilled.
Just in time, then. Just in time as we're recording here on a Friday afternoon. So, Ed is with Customer Service Solutions. It's a company where you can find more about them online at cssamerica.com. And their whole mission is to help organizations define, refine, and improve their customer service culture in their organization. I encourage you to go check out his website at cssamerica.com, where you can get blog posts, you can get articles, you can see links to great resources, all the kind of great resources to help an organization get stronger in delivering really good customer service. Ed, when you passed on a while back about the topic we were going to talk about today, you used the term voice of the customer.
Yes.
Talking about the voice of the customer. And I love that phrase, but I also think that's a phrase that may be a little hard for some people to kind of get their head around. Mm-hmm. So maybe let's start off talking about, as we're talking about this idea of creating your voice of the customer strategy. I got to ask right off the bat, what do you mean by voice of the customer when you get into that?
Okay, I'll tell you how I define it, and then you go ahead and feel free to piggyback on what I'm saying. But in terms of voice of the customer, when we use that phrase, especially from a strategic standpoint, it's saying, how do you basically listen to your customer in formal and informal ways and utilize that information to grow your business, improve your business, make the experience better for your customers. So when we think about voice of the customer, we're talking about how do you actually tap into one of the greatest resources you have to continuously improve and grow your business, which is your customer. And so I'll kind of pause there. But when I talk about voice of the customer with that definition, how would you add on to that, or how do you view it maybe a little bit differently, if at all?
Well, I think you summed it up pretty well. But what I would also add to it is that a lot of times people think, well, voice of the customer, as long as somebody fills out a survey or tells me in person how they feel about what we're doing, we're listening and that's enough. And I think the voice really goes a lot deeper than that. To me, sometimes it's got to find ways to get them to give you input, even though it may not be you can't just let it go and just assume that everybody's going to tell you what they want to tell you about the kind of service you're providing. Sometimes you got to go out there and find it and find that voice of your customer. And I think that's something a lot of organizations maybe don't push as hard as they should.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there were even studies done years ago that said for every complaint you hear, for example, there could be up to 26 other occasions of dissatisfaction that you don't hear about. Wow. So if you're relying on your customer to proactively give you feedback, and that is your voice of the customer strategy, you're going to be missing out on a lot of feedback. And your example about people saying, well, we do the surveys or we talk to people face to face, and that's our voice of the customer strategy. That's actually one of those responses that creates so much frustration in me. When I talk to clients or prospective clients about the voice of the customer, too often they say, hey, we do surveys, or hey, we did a focus group last year, or, hey, we already do that because, we have this particular survey that we launched via the web for anybody we have an email address with that asks these 5 questions. So when they think strategy, they think a one-time, point in time, hey, we did a survey, hey, we got the information kind of approach. And the reason why it's so frustrating to me is maybe they do that survey, maybe they do that focus group, but they're losing business every year and they don't know how to stop losing business. Or maybe they're getting complaints that are so significant that a lot of the customers are complaining straight to the executives of the business, and they're wondering, why are they so upset that they're all of a sudden complaining to the executives? Or maybe they're a client of ours is trying out a new perk or a new benefit, and it really doesn't improve satisfaction or retention, but they don't know why it didn't improve satisfaction or retention. So it's one of these situations where all these symptoms and problems are happening. It's a lost business, complaints being escalated, you're trying different things and they're not working, and they don't know why. So they're conjecturing, they're conjecturing that something's the reason, and they're trying to identify what that reason is through conjecture or assumption, but they don't know. And with the voice of the customer strategy, the idea is to know what is really driving these issues, these complaints, these growth opportunities, so you can be better at capitalizing on them.
Well, I think you brought up something there I think is really important as well. Way too many organizations I talk to, even local organizations I'm involved with, will sometimes hear one person's feedback on a product or service, good or bad, and take that to be that is what the customers now want. So in other words, somebody said we ought to start doing it this way, so let's talk about how we can do it this way. And it's one of those things where you need to understand the whole breadth of your customer base and all the different demographics, and making sure it's not just always responding to one person who says they like or dislike something. You need to know that information, but you've got to put it in perspective with everybody else as well. So it's getting rid of those assumptions that, well, if this one person said this, I'm sure that's what everybody feels, and we don't know that for sure. So.
Right, because that one person could be the anomaly. It could be that one person out of 10 or out of 100 or out of 1,000 who has a particular issue. And you don't want to make major changes to facilities or processes or policies or personnel based on one individual. You got to be a little bit more data driven, a little bit more objective, a little bit more strategic about how you go about doing things like that.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think getting information from your customers is so critical to listen to what they're telling you, but you've got to put it in the right frame of reference. You've got to have the right data around it, and you need to know the whole breadth of your clientele, not just from that one very, very vocal person, either positive or negative. So.
Right. And the reason why we do it, and I'm going to get kind of blunt here, kind of cold here, but the reason why we do it is it's not altruism. We want to get in a circle and sing Kumbaya with our customers. We want to feel good, and it's the right thing to do. And I love my customers.
That's what we do every Friday afternoon. I mean, you're always invited to the Kumbaya session here at the office, and you never show up. I'm so disappointed.
Yes. Well, if you Skyped me into it, I might participate, but I don't know if I'm up for driving to Hickory every day. So
we'll just have a giant circle of iPads on people on Skype and doing a giant virtual Kumbaya circle. So that'd be perfect. Great.
So, the reasons behind it really are, like I said, just to be blunt and cold. It's the reason to have a voice of the customer strategy is because of money and because of decision making. I mean, if I just have to be totally blunt about it, the reason why you have first reason why you have a voice of the customer strategy is money. I mean, if you want to retain or renew more of your contracts, more of your accounts, you want to upsell more to them, you want to cross-sell more to them, you want to proactively get more referrals from them, you have to have a strategy to do that. You don't want to leave money on the table. You don't want to lose customers because you have a lack of information, a lack of a strategic approach for gaining intelligence on your clients. You also want to know and identify certain areas of your organization, of the experience they have with the organization that are satisfaction drivers or dissatisfaction drivers. You want to know what are some of those things that are most important to them when they're evaluating your company versus a competitor, for example. Another reason that's monetary is you want to uncover new revenue opportunities. I mean, if you're in constant dialogue with your customers and you're considering a new program, a new service, maybe a new location for a facility or something like that, if you're really good at tapping into the voice of the customer, you can uncover some of those new revenue opportunities. Maybe it's a targeting question. You're trying to figure out who do you want to retain the most based on who's most at risk of not being retained. So if you do a good job with your voice of the customer strategy, you're targeting, identifying, and then targeting certain folks for those retention or growth opportunities. There's a lot of different reasons that go under the umbrella of money. I mean, there is definitely a financial reason to have a voice of the customer strategy.
Well, and I think that's a great answer to those people that, and I mean, there are people out there that will say, well, customer service is all just the touchy-feely stuff. It's just being nice, but at the end of the day, I've got a business to run, and I got to focus on how to make more money and what to do there. What you're saying is spot on, is that this listening to our customers and getting that voice input is critical to those financial outcomes.
Yes.
Because there's just so much, I love, it's money left on the table sometimes, that if we could find out how to harness that information and how to use that, this is all about building our business. It's not just making people like us,
Yeah, so when you talk about harnessing that information and utilizing it, that gets into the second point that I mentioned. Beyond even money, it's just good to have a voice of the customer strategy for decision-making purposes, for planning purposes. For example, if you are good at, through your research in the voice of the customer strategy, identifying what are the most important aspects of the experience that they have with your organization, the relationships that they have with your organization, then you can plan out, well, if I'm a physician's practice, if I'm a dentist, if I'm a restaurant, and these certain aspects, whether it's privacy or whether it's the waiting room or whether it's the television that can distract them a little bit, or maybe it's the quality of the food or the greeting. I mean, if you know specifically what is most important to them, then you can design the experience around what's most important to them. And you don't have to worry about investing tons of resources, tons of time, tons of money in everything, because you know what's most important to them. If you've done a great job in through your voice of the customer strategy, doing research on perks and benefits, then at that point, which perks and benefits should we emphasize and market, and which of those that are just not necessary because they really don't drive renewals, they really don't drive sales. And you can also use it in decision making for looking at the effectiveness of your communications. You can literally ask questions about, are you aware of this service? Are you aware of this website function that we have? Are you aware of this product? Are you aware of these sales? And that way you're actually utilizing your voice of the customer strategy to gauge the effectiveness of your customer communications and education. So along with the money factor, if you're a business, you're constantly making decisions. Hopefully you're doing a good bit of planning as well. And by having this kind of a research strategy, it just helps you to make sounder decisions, do better planning.
Great. Well, it sounds like enough reasons for me. So how do we go about doing this then? So if we've got this idea, we want to build a strategy around the voice of our customer. So teach me, Master, here. What do we do?
Well, the way I'm going to teach you today,
Padawan learner, little grasshopper. So right,
grasshopper. That's very good. I am going to put you in charge of a business, Alan.
Okay, because I'm not used to that at all. So
no, this will be a very different business than the one you're used to being in charge of.
Okay.
Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
You're a gardening mogul.
A gardening mogul. Gardening mogul. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and tell you, and I'm not making this up. I actually even just had a conversation with my wife the other day about how I have decided in the next several years, I actually am going to try to start taking up gardening as a pastime. So how wild is that? How convenient is that to this little example now? So
that actually is pretty wild, because I just talked to your wife yesterday, Alan, and we were chatting about that. So perfect timing.
Oh, this is all coming together. Okay, I see how it is.
Yeah. Well, essentially, as a gardening mogul, you own a series of gardening franchises up and down the East Coast.
Okay.
About 50% of your business is the in-store purchases that people typically have. And 50% is from annual contracts for commercial buildings, where you're supplying the plants and all the other foliage and all that sort of thing. So about 50% of these annual commercial contracts, the other 50% is your retail business. Okay?
Got it.
Got it?
I got it.
All right.
Sure.
Well, we're
making notes right here as we talk. So yes, I'm ready to go.
Excellent. We're going to walk through a 5-step process for dealing with part of your voice of the customer strategy. The first thing we suggest that you do, step 1, when you're thinking about the strategy, is to begin with the end in mind. Think about the money we talked about. Think about the decision-making needs that we talk about. And essentially, step 1 is you're going to create a laundry list of what are those decision-making information needs, what are those planning information needs, what are those money-related needs. So you're literally going to say, for Alan, the gardening mogul's business, you're going to say, when do those commercial contracts come up for renewal? And based on when they come up for renewal, I need to make sure that I'm renewing X% of these contracts every year. And you're thinking about your existing recurring walk-in clients. A lot of these are homeowners, et cetera. And you think about, well, how can I identify which of these may be a business owner? And I can actually maybe get them cross-sold one of our commercial contracts.
So what you're saying is go ahead and be thinking of kind of the end result of what you're wanting to learn and how you're going to use that information strategically. So you're already thinking in terms of what am I going to do, the end of the result instead of the beginning. So
right. So you're not thinking about, well, I need to do a survey.
Okay.
I need to do a focus group, but I need to just start talking to my customers more. You're starting more strategically than that. You're saying, I want to increase revenue. I want to increase renewals. I want to do more cross-selling between the in-store and the commercial. Mm-hmm. I want to do more upselling. I want to be a little bit more efficient and effective in targeting certain commercial accounts that I think are more at risk. So you start with the goal that's either a money-related goal or a decision-making and planning information-oriented goal.
Okay, got it. Okay. So
you have this big laundry list that comes out of step one. These are the key measures I want to improve. These are the key impacts that I want to have. Step two is you want to determine a proactive point-in-time need for each. In other words, exactly when do you need to retain or renew your contracts with your commercial accounts? Mm-hmm. Based on when you need to renew them, let's say it's going to be July 1st every year. That's the start of your fiscal year. When do you need to know information from those commercial accounts about their likelihood to renew in order to target renewal efforts? Well, I probably need to know this by, let's say, April 1st.
Sure.
I need to know it 3 months in advance, and that'll give me 3 months to create an approach that's tailored to each one of the commercial accounts. And therefore, I can implement these different strategies for those accounts in that 3-month window. So the next thing you'll do in step two is you're actually looking at point in time. If these are the measures I want to hit, these are the goals that I have, when do you need to hit those goals? And therefore, by what date prior to that do you need to have the information that's required to use it to hit that goal?
I see. Okay, so we're kind of starting with that goal in mind, and then once you know what your goals and your ultimate needs are going to be, then it's figuring out when you're going to need to start getting information to be able to meet those goals or have those things happen that you set as your end result.
Right. So you have your goal, you have your date when you want to hit the goal by, and then what we're doing now is we're starting to work backwards.
Right. Okay.
Step three. You want to ask this key question, and I'm going to say it a couple times because it's a lot of words, but there's a couple key points in it. What information do you need to know from whom and by when? Okay. So what's the information you need to know from whom and by when? So in step three, essentially what you're saying is if I need to renew people on July 1st, what information will help me in my renewal approach to them? Okay. Who do I need to get this information from, and when do I need to get the information? So in that commercial contracting example, well, you probably want to survey your commercial contract accounts. You need to do that. It seems like get the information by April 1, which means you might want to start your research process by March 1 or February 1.
Sure.
And then the question becomes, well, what's the kind of information that you want to get from them in that February 1 to April 1 window that'll help you in the renewal process? Right. So just as an example, what might be a couple pieces of information that you might want to ask a commercial account when you're trying to get them to renew with one of your gardening centers?
I could see things like needing to know what their prospective needs are from a facility standpoint. Are they looking to add locations? Are they looking to expand operations anywhere? That's the kind of things that'd be good and helpful to know. It'd be helpful to know what their track history has been on renewals over the past couple of years, just to make sure we're kind of moving them in the right direction. Be helpful to see if they had orders, purchases, jobs outside of what we normally do that we kind of added in for them throughout this past year that would help us guide maybe a better renewal process for them in the coming year. That'd be some of the information I could see right away.
Yeah, those are excellent examples. And you would also know, are they considering renewing, or how likely they are to renew? When they're working with you all, what are the most important aspects of the experience in working with you? So there might be 10 or 15 different aspects of your organization's attitudes, your processes, your systems, your billing, your website, the products themselves, the pricing. You may have all these attributes listed that are part of the experience, and you want them to tell you not only how satisfied they are with them, but how important are they to the renewal decision. So you did a great job there with what you just laid out, because essentially what you said is these are the attributes that I need to have information on in order to best renew them down the road. And essentially what you were doing there, Alan, was you were verbally creating surveys or research tools of some sort that are part of this voice of the customer strategy.
I see. So that kind of information where you're giving the customer a chance to tell you where their thought process is, what they're considering for the future, if they're given the opportunity to renew with you, are they planning on it? And if not, why would they not be planning on it? What would be the main things that would cause them to agree to renew with us? What would be the key factors that are important to them? Yeah, you're right. It's just verbally talking out the things that you would want a survey or even a focus group to kind of give you that information on.
Right. And if we think back to how I started this, I talked about the frustrations I have when I talked to a few of my clients about the voice of the customer strategy. And one of the ones I mentioned was the fact that they're losing business and don't know why. Well, in this survey that you just verbally constructed, you were talking about reasons why they would stay with you, reasons why they would go, likelihood to stay, likelihood to go. So you're learning that several months before the renewal ever happens. I mentioned complaints, and some get so significant that they can go straight to the executives. Well, instead of you, Alan Jackson, gardening mogul, getting all these complaints directly, if you had a good research process in place and you're asking questions about satisfaction, dissatisfaction months ahead of renewals, then you're probably going to learn about a lot of issues before they get to the point where they rise to a communication going to you that a lot of your staff or managers can handle. So when you think about it, you're not only asking these questions to prep for the renewal process, but you're asking these questions to try to head off issues before they get too bad, before they get escalated too far.
It is a whole lot easier to keep a client when you find out that they're dissatisfied and you've got a chance to fix it, as opposed to them leaving and you find out afterwards why they left, and then you got to try to figure out how to get them back. That's almost impossible a lot of times. So.
Right. Yeah, I was actually doing training for a client yesterday, and I put up this graphic from this research study done years ago. And the research basically said if you have a client with a complaint and you resolve it quickly, you have an 82% chance they'll come back to you.
Okay.
If you have a customer with a complaint and they make the complaint but you don't resolve it, you have I believe it was a 29% they'll come back to you. So big gap.
Yeah.
But the next percentage is the most interesting. If you have a customer with a significant complaint and they don't tell you at all, you only have a 9% chance they're going to come back.
Wow.
Right.
So if you're sitting there waiting for your clients to tell you when they're having some issues or things they don't like, you're missing so much input, and when they're gone, they are gone. I mean, you're not going to get them back more than likely.
Right. And it's even if you take that lower end 29%, even if you don't resolve their complaint, just by getting them to voice the complaint, you have 3 times the chance to retain them than if they would have felt the complaint, but you never asked, they never told you, and they never came back.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. So getting this information, getting this dialogue is critical. So your third point was trying to really identify what's the information we need, who do we need to be getting it from, when do we need to be gathering it?
Yeah, and step 4 is the how. The how. In other words, is this a web-based survey? You would do a web-based survey if you want to keep it low cost, if you have a great email contact database. Focus groups. Focus groups is a lot more qualitative. So you're typically doing those more so if you're targeting some premium clients, some high-end clients, and or maybe there's a specific issue that you're wanting to dig really deeply on. Right. You don't get the quantity of input, but you can target certain folks and get more depth in the input. You have intercept interviews. You have telephone surveys. Telephone surveys are great in that you're not waiting for the customer to reply to an email, and virtually everybody will have a telephone that you can access, and you can make multiple attempts to access them via the phone, and you have a little bit more control over who does and does not complete the survey because you're being proactive as opposed to just looking at those folks who are a little bit more web savvy or don't mind the web survey. So you have to determine in step 4 the best how to get this kind of information.
And in some situations, it may be a combination of vehicles as well. I mean, you are looking at a wide variety of populations for any company. Yes, web, internet surveys are good, but they do tend to skew a little on the younger side. Telephone is good, but it is also one of those things where with mobile phones and less people using the phone truly as a phone, it's becoming a little harder using telephone for residential type work. Focus groups, like you said, are great for the qualitative work, but you're not going to be able to pull a true representative, valid sample that represents your entire organization from a traditional focus group. So sometimes it's just a combination of the measures to find out what's going to fit certain pockets of our population better than others.
Yeah. And the 5th step is basically just, and now that you've laid out a lot of these key points, this is our goal, step 1. This is basically when we need to have the information for that goal, step 2. Step 3 is, okay, what are the performance attributes? What do we need? From whom and by when? Step 4 talks about exactly how are we going to get in. Step 5, basically, that's when you fill out your Gantt chart. You fill out your project plan. You create your voice of the customer strategy, and you identify your point people. Who's going to be responsible for this? Who are the stakeholders who are going to be involved? What's the process going to be like? So instead of saying we're going to do a survey, you start with the end in mind, and you end up with a survey that's going to get the information you need in order to leverage the voice of your existing clients to retain more dollars, to sell more dollars, to do it in an efficient, targeted, and effective manner.
And Ed, there's so many organizations I know that over the years I hear them say, well, we're going to do a survey of our customers, or we're going to do a survey of our employees, or whatever it may be. And they haven't gone through any of these steps. They're basically just saying, you know what, we think we need a survey. So it's a very generic survey. It's very standard maybe for their industry. They get the data back and just it's not really data they can use because they didn't go through that definition process of all this, of stating what the goals are for it and how they're going to do it and really thinking through all that information. If you just sign on and say, yep, let's do a survey, and sure, through the web sounds good, let's do it, and there's no rationale for all those steps, then you are kind of setting yourself up for a tough process as far as how that data is really going to be useful to you.
Yeah, and one last key point before we pause here after this initial layout of the voice of the customer process. When you were talking there about surveys, a lot of companies doing a web-based survey and thinking that's all it's needed. One major mistake I see so many companies doing nowadays is when they do the web-based survey, they use a generic email link. So basically, you cannot attribute any response back to any individual respondent. So that might give you good general overview information on your customer's experience. But if you're trying to renew a contract, you're trying to get more sales from existing clients, and you don't know that Joe customer said A, B, and C, and then Mary customer said D, E, and F. If you don't know that the specific information that you can link back to that specific account, probably 70 or 80% of that information is absolutely useless. You have got to be able to tie it back to the individual account.
And I know sometimes people are concerned about doing that because of confidentiality purposes, or maybe it's a more complicated technical process. I'm with you. I think, the more you can deliver unique links to the survey that will identify the person taking the survey without them having to go in and fill in all these demographic questions. The fallback position is, you can send everybody to a survey or administer a survey and ask a whole lot of demographic questions to try to get that information. But just think about what you're doing to that customer. You're asking them to fill out a lot of information about themselves when you may already have that information about them on your system.
Exactly.
There's no point in asking them for things they shouldn't have to provide you. So it's more of a convenience for the person taking the survey to go ahead and link it to their data, so that way they don't have to give you all that demographic background information.
Right. Just one anecdotal story relating to that. We're doing survey work now for some pro sports organizations, and there's a lot of different information that we're getting on the client's database, such as, and this is a situation where it's a motorsports client. Are they a camper or not? Are they buying tickets just for one race or for an entire weekend? Are they a first-time season ticket holder or first-time ticket holder or long-term? Are they season ticket holder or just an event, that particular event, that time of year season ticket holder? So there's about 8 or 10 different attributes that we get on some of these databases that we could plug into a survey, make the survey a lot longer. But since they give it to them on the contact database, we don't have to ask those on the survey. So when we do the analysis, we can still stratify based on those factors, but we're not having to unnecessarily lengthen the survey to get that kind of information.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that. So it's good to have that wealth of data at your fingertips when you administer a survey. So, Ed, we've gone through the 5 steps that you recommend kind of in helping start to define how we get that voice of our customer together. The 5 steps there are kind of working backwards a little bit, but getting us to the point where at the 5th step, we're actually filling out our project plan and kind of know who's going to be handling it and who's going to be doing what. So are we okay to take a quick break and then we'll come back and follow up, circle back and see what next process you recommend following up on that?
Sounds great.
Okay, good.
Sounds great.
Let's take a quick little break. We'll be back with Stepping Up Service here on The Mesh in just a moment.
We'll get back to your show in a moment. Just a reminder, you're listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Find out more at themesh.tv and give us feedback on what you like. And now, as promised, back to your show.
Hello and welcome back to Stepping Up Service here on themesh.tv. I'm Alan Jackson with The Jackson Group and Ed Gagnon with Customer Service Solutions. We're talking about creating your voice of the customer strategy. But before we get back into that, just a quick reminder that you are listening to this show on the Mesh.tv network. So the Mesh is really an online network of original programs and produced programs from other avenues that we are pushing through this network and making free to the public through Apple iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and some other different podcast mediums and formats. All the shows are available on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. You can go online and subscribe to all of our shows for free. When you subscribe to it, that means that you're going to get new episodes downloaded to you automatically whenever they're released without you having to go hunt and find them yourself. So we really encourage you to subscribe to any of the shows you like. We do have a variety of shows on the Mesh Network, ranging from business to entertainment to music to sports, to everything in between. So a lot of different opportunities of things to listen to. We encourage you to go check out our website at themesh.tv and learn more about the network. So Ed, let's get back into this voice of the customer strategy. So we just finished up a second ago talking through the 5 steps you recommend on going about defining and getting that voice information and data. What needs to be the process for that? So what's next? What do we do at that point?
Well, I want us to think about that 5-step process we just went through for those more point-in-time oriented information needs, where we need to renew by a certain date, or we need to make a decision by a certain date, or we need to have this planning information gathered by a certain date. What I'm going to do now is walk through a very similar process, but this is dealing with just ongoing operations, ongoing experience. It's not necessarily for a point in time to make a real specific decision or because some renewal contract is coming up.
So as opposed to trying to get a snapshot of where you are with either a potential client or a group of clients, this is more of it becoming part of your day-to-day operations.
Exactly. So think about Alan, the gardening mogul.
Yes.
And Alan, the gardening mogul, wants to keep his thumb, his green thumb, green thumb on the pulse of the experience in his stores up and down the East Coast.
And
so you want to...
And I got so excited about the idea of gardening that during the break that we took, I went ahead and planted, I think I got some corn, I got some tomatoes, and something else I can't quite identify, but the seed looked really cool, so I went ahead and planted it. So we'll see what it is in a few months. I went ahead and did it. Excellent. I know it was only a 30-second break, but I'm a really good gardener now, so thanks for getting me inspired to do that.
Well, I'm happy to do that, and I know that the room you're in has no windows, so I'm not really expecting much out of those plants, but...
not much chance for moisture or sunlight or anything else. Maybe I need to rethink this.
Live and learn.
Right.
So, well, Alan, based on that background, when you think about one of your typical retail garden centers, what aspects of the experience do you want to get customer feedback on so you can continuously improve the experience?
I'd really like to get feedback on the selection that they have available to them of products that we sell in the store. I'd like to see the customer service mentality of the staff they come into contact with, and maybe even wait time, just checking out and all. That would be some things that would be pretty important to me.
Okay, well, that's great because that goes back to what CSS, our company, calls the 3 drivers of customer satisfaction. It's attitude, process, and product. And you talked about employee attitudes and is the customer service oriented. You talked about wait times, which is a process characteristic. You talked about product selection, which obviously is product related. So that's great. And if any organization is wanting to design a survey that gets a comprehensive look through the customer's eyes of the experience, along with throwing in the facility, if it's got a physical location, those are the 3 areas that we suggest they focus on: attitudes of employees, processes, and products. Those are great examples, Alan.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, great job. So
I know what I'm doing here. I'm a gardening mogul. I mean, I've been at this a long time now, so I kind of have the experience under my belt.
Yes, you have the modesty there too. I'm impressed.
Yeah,
so
I
yes,
worked on that as well.
Yeah. So step 1, you're basically defining what aspects of the experience do I want to get feedback on. Step 2 gets into that same long question I asked when we were going through the process of retention, of decision making. It's basically, what information do you need to know from whom and by when? And maybe the by when isn't as important as it was in the other case when you're dealing with renewal deadlines and decision making and planning and all those sorts of things. But it goes back to, for example, if you're talking about processes, what are some examples of the kind of information about your processes? You brought up wait time, for example. What are some examples of processes that a customer could experience as a customer of one of Alan's gardening retail centers?
Let's see, process-wise would be if they're having things delivered to them, maybe they're shopping online, delivery of the product. If it's something that is on back order at our store or not available and we're going to have it delivered to them or sent to them or arranged for them to pick up at a later date, how is that process run? Is it smooth? Do we feel like our customers are kind of being kept informed and communicated with? If they're able to get signed up for newsletters or catalogs or anything else, are they getting that information and sharing that process efficiently as well?
Yep. So those are great examples. And so essentially what you're doing here is after you've identified some of those key groupings of the experience that you want to analyze, then you're going into this step 2 where you're saying, well, what are the specific attributes, specific pieces of information I want to gather about the experience within each of these categories? And just like we were doing when we were talking about the decision-making, the money-oriented voice of the customer strategy, here we're starting with the end in mind. And in step 3, we're starting to go backwards even further, where we're not only saying this is the information I need and by when, but now what kind of research tool do I need to construct to gather that information? And oftentimes with what you're talking about with the customer experience, you are more likely to use a focus group, for example, because you are talking about the experience, what it's like to find our business in the first place via the web, in the paper, whatever the case might be. What is it like to physically find our facility? What's it like when you first walk in? What's that first impression? Is it easy to navigate? So when you're talking about the experience, you can definitely decide that focus groups might be more likely to be one of those aspects of one of those research tools that you might utilize.
Yeah.
But in this case, you're definitely in step 3 saying, is this a survey? Is it a focus group? Is it an intercept interview? What's the best method to gather that information?
And again, I always harken back to the idea of you do a survey when you want to get a good representation from a certain demographic or group. You use a focus group if there's any ambiguity in the data you have received in the past, or if there are certain key things that you really want to hone in on and get the most descriptive, qualitative examples of ideas possible. So both processes definitely serve their purpose, and I think they can be used together. They can be part of the same process, or they can have their own independent goals. Either way. Yeah,
just to give you a real specific example of that, we just completed a large-scale survey for a particular client. It was both hard copy and web-based survey. We got a lot of data, and a lot of the data showed that this was for a regulatory organization, that there were complaints and issues relating to inconsistency of information or employee attitudes and things like that. Well, you could use the word inconsistency, and you could try to define it and come up with a half a dozen different definitions. Or you could think about employee attitudes and come up with a half a dozen different definitions of what's a bad employee attitude. But what we ended up doing on a secondary level is we said, let's do focus groups. And if people bring up these points, let's say, well, give me an example of what you mean by bad attitude. Give me an example of what you mean by inconsistency. And that allows in a focus group for there to be deeper dialogue to understand how could people interpret an interaction as being a negative attitude from an employee, or how could people interpret information being given as being inconsistent. So you're not just hearing their feeling about what the issue is, but you're understanding what causes them to draw that conclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think focus groups are very, very valuable for that process. I agree. So you've decided kind of how you're going to administer this process, what kind of vehicle to use or methodology to use to get the kind of information you're looking to gather. And then what do we do after that?
And step 4 is just like step 5 in the previous example. That's when you, as with all good planning, you're identifying your point people, you're laying your schedule out through the year. When are we going to do the focus groups? When are we going to do the web surveys? When are we going to do the phone surveys? When are we going to do the intercept interviews or whatever other research methods that you utilize? You're actually planning to strategically gather different information during the year or from year to year so that you can strategically evaluate and make decisions to continuously improve the customer experience.
So really, it sounds like to me what we're talking about is the process for going in and doing this, getting the voice of your customer on a snapshot basis for a certain time of the year or just to get a good understanding. It carries forward a lot of the same process steps as building this into an ongoing part of your culture in an organization in general, right?
Yes, definitely does. The difference is obviously in the first case, we're dealing with money and some of those decision-making factors. You're doing it because you're trying to time the receipt of the information so you can make decisions and leverage it for additional revenue or retention growth. In the other case, it's just an ongoing continuous improvement of your experience. And you're not necessarily looking to use this information for a specific account. You're using it to improve internally.
Okay, so we've got our processes in place for helping develop that voice of the customer strategy. Sounds like a lot of it is just really making sure you're going into this process with the end goal in mind. You know what you want to learn from the process. You know what you're looking for. And picking the right kind of vehicle to get the kind of information you're looking for. And then just going ahead and pulling the trigger, putting together that project plan and just making it happen. I admire those organizations who have weaved something like this into their constant day-to-day operations.
Yes.
They're always looking for feedback. It's not just it's survey time, so let's pull out the old survey and send it out to everybody, and then we're done with it for a few years. It's really this idea of this. We constantly are wanting feedback from our clients, and I think you can tell the difference between somebody who is giving you a survey because they know they're kind of have to, because it's just that time to do a survey with our customers, versus those that really are seeing this as a valuable tool to their process, and they're planning on using the results. I mean, I think there's a real difference in organizations, and you can sometimes pick up on that when you get a phone call survey or something else. You can kind of tell, is this a really passionate project for them, or is this something they're doing as part of a checklist that they just got to get through?
So we had one client where we designed 7 different surveys across 7 different customer groups and multiple methods of doing research, and 2 years later they had actually implemented one of those surveys. We have another client where we do a biannual survey for them, and they have this one particular room where they put in all their technology plans for the year, all their system plans for the year. And as a part of this tremendously large Gantt chart that literally is printed and put on 3 different walls in this one conference room, the survey and some of the specific recommendations coming out of the survey are in there just with technology changes. They've actually built it into their continuous improvement work plan. So one organization gets it. The other organization really doesn't get it. Maybe the intent is there, but the strategic approach, the voice of the customer strategic approach that is focused on, I need this information to make this decision to earn this money, that part's missing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think you and I both ran the same circles with many similar organizations over the years, so we've seen our fair share of both of those types of organizations. Well, I don't think we can express strongly enough the need to have that handle on your customer's voice And really, that's the things that they're saying and the things that they haven't said yet, but we need to find out a way to get them to tell us. So we're making some good, intelligent decisions. We're reaping the financial benefits from it, and we're keeping a very engaged client base along the way as well. So,
yes.
Great.
Yep.
Ed, thanks so much for your time on that. Now,
sure.
We always do wrap up our show with our customer service story of the month, kind of our own personal story of something we've encountered in the past few weeks that we think has some significance in the world of customer service. Do you mind if I go first?
No, feel free.
Okay, great. So this past weekend was my birthday.
Oh, yes. Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Belated.
No, that's all right. I'm 23 and very, very happy to be that age. So
is that 23? That's not in dog years, correct? That's actual human years.
It's probably a little closer to the dog year equation, but I'm trying to retain that younger age as long as I can, or tell people that anyway. I don't think I'm fooling anybody anymore. So I decided something I wanted to do for my birthday is I've never been on a zip line before. Always wanted to go. Thought it'd be fun to go do. So I took the family to go zip lining, and we found a place that's pretty simple, not a very extreme course or anything. It's kind of for people who have never really done it before. Then we go. I'm a little more the adventurous one in our family. I'm willing to do anything most of the time, and I normally have to drag them along. Sometimes kicking and screaming to do these things. So we decided we were going to go to this facility just not too far away from where we live, and got there, and we weren't sure what to expect. It's kind of a new foreign thing for us, and we were kind of playing the family where we ask a lot of questions and we're trying to figure things out so we know what we're getting into. I do have to say that when you take an experience like this where you're going to have a physical encounter, a physical experience that could be scary for some of the people, it could be nerve-wracking, it could be having to calm a lot of nerves, personality of your staff really has a huge impact on that. And this was an example where the staff of this organization really did a great job of making everybody feel so comfortable. My kids were very nervous about it. They're 12 and 7. And even though we got up to the top, we did all the bridge and climbing stuff getting up there, they just decided at the very last moment, they're looking down from the height, and they're like, we can't do this. So we tried our best to encourage them. They still just couldn't do it. So one of the guys up there with us said, that's not a problem. I'm going to take them all the way back down. And so it was a good 20-minute process for him to take my kids back all the way down and all the way back to the facility and set them up with something to watch on TV and kind of relax a little bit while we were waiting for my wife and I to finish going through the course. And, there wasn't even a hesitation. There was no sign of frustration on their behalf that they're having to take time away from the tour that we're on to go do this. He honestly just doubled back, took the kids back, made them feel so okay with the fact that they just weren't ready to do this quite yet. Got them set up back at the headquarters, comfortable, and then came to join us back up on the tour again right away. With a smile on his face the whole time, not a single hesitation, no guilty conscience or anything. That made that whole process so much better because, that could have gone really bad. That could have been a very big frustration for a lot of people. And these guys, I think, were trained really well on, let's make this a fun experience for everybody, no matter what. And I think that was so important there. So I just really had a good experience with that organization this past weekend. Yeah, and that's wonderful. I mean, we oftentimes talk about the single greatest quality of somebody who's good at customer service is that they're empathetic. They're understanding. And you don't have to feel what other people feel, but if you could try to understand what they feel. I mean, I'm sure these are guys or ladies who are the employees who have almost 100% comfort in doing what y'all were doing, and yet they could still relate to the anxiety of the 7-year-old and the 12-year-old, of the need to feel calm and be in a relaxing environment with the TV and all that and feel settled and comfortable. So these are folks who, they're dealing with somebody or something that could be danger oriented. And yet they were empathetic enough to realize, hey, not everybody has this low level of fear for a situation like this. There's plenty of people who would be anxious, be nervous, and I need to be understanding of that. And even better, I didn't even think about this until just now. When they took my kids back down, so my kids had already gone through half the tour with us. Half the tour was just going up and up and up another level through rope bridges and other climbing apparatus until we got to the actual true zip line part. They took the kids all the way back, came back to us and let us continue doing the tour at that point. And as soon as we landed, they right away said, well, listen, we're going to give you a credit back for the 2 kids on this.
Wow.
Because, you shouldn't have to pay for the tour if they didn't do the whole thing. And I thought, man, not only did they take another extra 20 minutes out of their schedule to take care of my kids did get to experience almost half of the experience, but they didn't even hesitate in saying, no, we're going to give you credit on this because that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I didn't even have to ask about it. That was just volunteered to me right away. So again, they knew what they were doing with regards to making that experience a really positive one. So
yeah, it kind of makes you think that it's part of their culture, because they were so quick to make those decisions and so empowered to make those decisions. You got to feel that that's part of the culture of that organization.
Absolutely. So I was really impressed with that. So Ed, are you going to end us on a positive note or a more frustrating note?
I'm ending on a frustrating note.
No,
so,
that's okay.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I know that the last few podcasts seems like your story hasn't been positive. Mine has been positive. So it's interesting we flipped without even talking about it today.
We did. All right, lay it on me. What do we got?
Well, I'll start out by saying this is a big box home improvement store story, so you can pretty much imagine why it's not positive. But essentially, it was the story of the black tomato.
Okay.
My wife has a tomato plant on her back porch, and it's growing like crazy, and the top of the tomatoes are wonderful green. You can tell they're getting ready to be ripe, but when you flip it and look on the bottom, it's black. Every tomato is black on the bottom.
Well, can I just go on record as saying that in my gardening superstore chain,
yes,
that would not ever be the case. You would never have black tomatoes. I'm just going to go ahead and say you guys probably need to pick a different place to shop next time. So,
well, it's interesting because my wife went to Allen's gardening center after she went to the big box home improvement store after I did, and she got the right answer. So that's basically what the story is. She had this tomato with an issue, the black bottom tomato, and when we went there, we know we have issues at this home improvement store, but we know there's one lady with the best attitude who is just an expert in all things plants in the gardening center.
Sure.
So I had to go there to get one of my 63 bags of pine bark mini nuggets, which is a totally different story. And here I walk in with this black tomato, and I'm looking around for my go-to lady in the garden center. I ask for help because I don't see her, and there's literally 4 employees standing around me in the garden center, and they say she's not here. And I show them the tomato, and all I get is a bunch of dull stares for about 5 or 10 seconds. And then all of a sudden, one of the employees walks up to me, and he says, "Let me see." He looks at it, and he says, "That's a fungus." And he starts walking. Okay. So I'm just standing there, and I'm like, I guess I ought to follow him. So I start walking after him. He goes into the main store, doesn't talk to me at all as we're walking into the main store. He goes into this plant chemical section, and he's just staring at the chemicals. Oh, and so after about 10 or 15 seconds, I asked what he's looking for. He said, in very technical terminology, he said, "I'm looking for a green bottle." Mm-hmm. So I start looking at green bottles, and I see a couple that have a little bit of green on them. And I said, "Well, what specifically are you looking for?" "I'm not sure what the brand is," he says, "but it's a green bottle." So we're standing there looking for green bottles in the chemical section. He doesn't know. He says, "Sorry, it's a fungus. I don't see the green bottle. I've gotten the green bottle for some folks. It works, but we just don't have it." He turns and he walks away.
Wow.
Yes. So that was, I guess, their example of going above and beyond. I brought it home to my wife, and she said, "Oh, well, not surprised. I'll just try to go back there when our go-to lady's there." And instead, she went to Allen's Gardening Center.
Right.
And she actually did find somebody at the gardening center, and this individual said, "Oh, that's not a fungus. That's actually indicative of a lack of calcium in the soil. Here's some spray. Just spray it on your plants, put some of it in the soil, and by having more calcium, then they'll grow without that black part on the bottom."
Interesting. Now, are you sure that individual at the big box store that was trying to help you, are you sure he worked there? Because it sounded like he might have just been somebody just randomly walking around. So you're pretty sure he was actually an employee?
He's actually helped me with pine bark mini nuggets before, and he had one of those red jackets on, so I'm pretty sure that he has helped. But he I think he knows enough to be dangerous. But I guess the big tip is sometimes no help is better than help.
Well, I was going to say that's actually more frustrating. I thought your story was going to end with the 4 people giving you just the vacant stares. And I thought, yeah, that's pretty bad. But actually to be walked without any real instruction, no further information, very kind of quick answers, and still not give you any resolution is actually worse. So
right, yeah, and the fact that he diagnosed the problem incorrectly,
yeah,
and didn't give me the thought that, hey, he didn't know what he was talking about. So you got to know your stuff, and if you don't know your stuff, then tell the customer, hey, this isn't my area of expertise. Let me find somebody who is. Let me take a picture with my smartphone. I'll contact the gardening lady. I'll get your phone number. I'll call you back because I don't want to provide you some misinformation. Have you buy something I'm not sure will work. So sometimes if you don't know the answer, don't pretend like you do. It could turn out worse for you and the customer.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I don't want to label all of the bigger monolithic department stores the same way, but that is a danger that I think people who run those larger stores have to be keep in mind, is that you can stock a lot of inexperienced people, probably a lot cheaper than you could, but it's the ones who really know their stuff are the ones we're going to seek out. Yes. And be disappointed when we can't find that person.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of those stores that do have that one person that you just know that person knows their stuff. And it makes it that much more obvious when that person's not there how poor the rest of the quality experience is. So
yes, exactly.
All right.
So sorry to end with a negative, Alan.
Well, that's all right. We hadn't ended with a negative one, I think, collectively in quite a while as the last one of the show. So let's go ahead and roll it out there. That's fine. And we treat all these negative stories as still good learning opportunities for anybody listening. So let's take the positive from it going forward. Well, Ed, thanks so much for your conversation today, your voice, as we talk about the voice of the customer and the importance of developing that strategy for it. Again, and I know as people listen to all these shows, there's some common themes that are being recommended and talked about, and that's on purpose, because what we are talking about are things that the key messages about listening and communicating and using information and finding out about your customers are so absolutely critical. And I think, Ed, thanks for kind of summing that up for us and getting us on track of how we go about developing some of that strategy to learn what our customers are thinking and wanting to tell us. So
sure.
You can learn more about Ed and his company, Customer Service Solutions, at cssamerica.com. That's the website for Customer Service Solutions, where you can hear and see all about what they're doing. You get links to this podcast in particular, newsletter you can sign up for, blog post, links to articles, all the good stuff that Ed is putting up there with his team that can be of help. And then, of course, if you have further needs and real more developed needs for your organization, definitely reach out to them at Customer Service Solutions. I know for a fact that they can help you out with that. And then on my end, you've got thejacksongroup.com. That's THE Jackson Group, all one word, .com, where we work with organizations on engaging in the engagement level, satisfaction level of employees, the retention level of customers and patients, and where they feel about the experience, and help you understand that data and how to use it. So, for Stepping Up Service, this is themesh.tv. Please check us out online on iTunes or Stitcher Radio or on the Mesh website at themesh.tv, and drop us a note and let us know what you think of the show or some ideas for future topics. Ed, I hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too, Alan.
All right, thanks for talking with me again, and we'll look forward to talking to everybody next month. Take care.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.